This is the story of an Israeli spy so daring that he infiltrates the highest levels of the Syrian military. He memorizes the locations of secret Syrian gun emplacements on the Golan Heights overlooking Israel. He boldly transmits his vital information to Israel from this apartment in Damascus, across the street from Syrian military headquarters. June 5th, 1967, the six-day war erupts. Israel launches a preemptive strike and silences the guns of the Golan, pinpointed by the Israeli spy. The spy, Cohen, undercover in Damascus. The Golan Heights, a mighty fortress created by the hand of nature, since biblical times a barrier between Arab and Jew. Strategically vital to whoever controls its rugged hills, young Israeli tourists now visit this beautiful, brooding, and somber place that once posed a deadly threat to the people of Israel.
Today we can see how important it is up here. And we can see these observation posts and realize that they could see everything. That is why the Golan is so important for Israel and the settlements.
From the Golan Heights, the guns of Syria fired on Israeli settlers who worked in the valley below. For nearly 20 years, from the late 1940s, the farmers of the Israeli kibbutzim had to scratch a living from the soil while facing the threat of the Syrian guns. Families often spent days and nights in bomb shelters. For this brief moment in history, after a millennium of conflict, the Golan is in Israeli hands. The threat has been removed, for now. Security comes through the barrel of a gun and the cunning of Israeli intelligence.
The struggle for the Golan Heights went swiftly and well and smoothly, thanks to a man by the name of Cohen, who had been planted in Syria a long time before and who acted as an Israeli spy.
Cohen's parents were Syrian Jews who moved to Alexandria, Egypt. He was a loner, devout, studious, with a phenomenal memory, an ear for languages, and an interest in everything from science and weapons to photography. Cohen had all the makings of an ideal spy. As a student, Cohen becomes involved with the underground smuggling of Jews from Egypt to Israel, including his own family. He attends university in Cairo, but increasing anti-Jewish fervor forces him out of school and finally out of Egypt. He joins his relatives in Israel. Cohen quits a dull desk job translating Arabic newspapers and magazines for the Ministry of Defense. He requests a more challenging assignment with Israeli intelligence. His psychological profile, prepared here at Israeli intelligence headquarters, warns of potential trouble signs. Despite his photographic memory and willingness to die for Israel, he is at conflict with himself, driven by a powerful sense of self-importance. He is impulsive, too eager to take risks. The request is denied. Disappointed, he goes back to school, becomes a successful businessman, and marries Nadia Magleb. They set up housekeeping in an apartment in Bat Yam, just outside Tel Aviv. It's life in a suburban housing development. Standard, conventional, even a little boring. But Amman is Israeli military intelligence has always kept an eye on Cohen. His innate talent is too good to pass up. In 1960, Eli Cohen is offered a dangerous assignment. Military intelligence is looking for spies who can go undercover. Spies who can pass as Arabs. Israel is a small nation living in constant threat. Information is power. Cohen, with his Syrian parentage, his past life in Egypt, and his fluency in Arabic is made to order. He begins his intelligence training. In the streets of the cities, he learns how to shadow suspects and how to elude those who might be shadowing him. He is immersed in Arabic culture and the elaborate rituals of the Islamic religion. In this very mosque, he memorizes prayers and the passages from the Quran that all devout Muslims must know. He wanders the Arab bazaars that still exist in Israel, testing his new identity. His cover is to be that of a businessman, specializing in the export of brass and copper and selling furniture to buyers in Europe. He must know his products well. And he learns the trade craft of espionage. Here in Cohen's own hand are instructions he receives on how to develop microfilm. Cohen's superiors have determined that his assignment will be Syria. Syria has been a vocal enemy, and its bombardment of Israel from the Golan Heights has made life a torment for those who live in fatal range. Cohen learns everything he can about Syrian society and politics. He even learns to speak Arabic with a Syrian accent. And then he is told he must learn everything about a different place, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Why? It is part of his elaborate cover. Argentina has a large Syrian community. Cohen's career as a deep penetration agent will begin here. March 1st, 1961. Alone and carrying a forged Argentinian passport, Eli Cohen arrives in Buenos Aires with a new identity. His name, Kamel Amin Sabet. He takes an apartment on Tacuary Street and begins to frequent cafes where Syrians come together for coffee and backgammon. At places like the Café La Paz and La Casa Árabe, he curries the friendship of the most prominent Syrians, building the credible story that he is a Syrian importer-exporter whose business frequently takes him to Europe. One of those he meets is the Syrian embassy's military attaché, Amin al-Hafez, and up-and-coming leader of Syria's Ba'ath Party. When Cohen tells him that he will soon be moving to Damascus, al-Hafez eagerly gives the spy introductions to Syrian high society. Cohen's cover fools everyone. January 1962. Cohen arrives in Damascus and rents an apartment directly across the street from Syrian Army headquarters. He can keep an eye on the comings and goings of the military and report what he sees and hears back to Israel via radio. He re-establishes his lucrative import-export business. His money, lavish parties, and charm gain him easy access to Syria's elite. They do not suspect that hidden in his apartment are the tools that help make Ali Cohen, alias Kamel Sabeth, a master spy. Disguised in the bottom of an electric mixer is his secret radio, connecting him to Israeli intelligence. Its antenna is the cord of an electric shaver. Concealed in seemingly harmless bars of soap is plastic explosive. An innocent-looking aspirin are actually deadly poison, to kill himself if necessary. But the most important weapon in Eli Cohen's arsenal is his mind, his almost photographic memory, and his ability to grasp complicated ideas. Cohen carefully cultivates friends in the Syrian military. Trusting Syrian Air Force pilots take him up on joy rides in airplanes and gliders. Army officers invite him along on trips to the Golan Heights. There are no closed doors for Cohen. His friends proudly show off every hidden artillery emplacement, every camouflaged trench and bunker, the location of every tank and gun. Cohen doesn't need to take notes. His superb memory retains everything. At this now abandoned Syrian hotel in the Golan, Cohen partied with his officer friends and listened carefully as they carelessly revealed state secrets. Crumbling walls and rusting lawn chairs are all that remain now. But here, Eli Cohen listened as loose-lipped military men talked about the size and disposition of the Syrian armed forces. And he listened as they talked about the Syrian order of battle in the event of another war with Israel. March 1963. In the latest in a series of military coups, Cohen's old friend from Buenos Aires, General Amin el-Hafez, becomes the president of Syria. Israel now has a spy on the inside, privy to Syria's deepest secrets. The new president even considers making the Israeli spy the Syrian Minister of Defense. Cohen is trusted enough to be told of a Syrian plot to cripple Israel by cutting off its water supply. For Israel, a nation of deserts, water is more valuable than diamonds. It desperately needs water to survive. Water comes to Israel from the Sea of Galilee and the River Jordan. Their headwaters are deep within the Golan Heights. Syria had developed an ingenious system of pumps and dams designed to divert those waters, forcing the Israeli nation to die of thirst. Eli Cohen alerts Israeli intelligence to the Syrian plan. In November 1964, a series of Israeli bombing raids completely destroys the project. Syria abandons its scheme. At that same time, Cohen sneaks back into Israel to visit his family. A rare moment of happiness. It will be his last visit home. For a while, he can stop being a spy and be himself again. He has never told Nadia the true nature of his business, but she suspects.
On his last visit, he had changed. He was unusually tense. He was getting upset over many meaningless incidents. His eyes were red. He even shouted at his sister, saying, "Leave me alone. My hands are on fire."
Cohen is racked with stress and anxiety, but he insists on going back to Syria one more time.
I understood that I had no choice, but he promised me that it would end.
One more mission, Kamel Amin Sabeth would then vanish, and Eli Cohen would come in from the cold, but Nadia was afraid.
I felt it was the last time we would see each other, that it was our separation.
Cohen returns to Syria and becomes Kamel Sabeth again. He resumes his transmission of radio messages to Israel and smuggles out microfilm hidden in the furniture he exports to his customers in Europe. Everything has gone perfectly. But now things begin to go wrong. His secret transmissions are broadcast at exactly 0830 hours. Too predictable. He sends 31 radio messages that exceed 9 minutes within the span of 1 month. With the help of Soviet military advisors, radio detection vans prowl the streets of Damascus. January 1965. From his apartment, Eli Cohen sends a vital message to Israeli intelligence in Tel Aviv, revealing Syrian plans to help train and bankroll the PLO. He stays on the air for a full hour. Slowly, the detection vans zero in on him. As Cohen waits for a return signal from Israel, the front door crashes in. Colonel Ahmed Suadami, head of Syrian counterintelligence, places Cohen under arrest. Tel Aviv. A representative of Israeli intelligence arrives at the Cohen's apartment in Bat Yam.
I saw his face without a smile, and I became horrified. I got scared. He held me by the shoulders. Come, sit down, sit on the sofa. Eli has been captured. And I said, in Syria? And he answered, yes.
In the weeks following Cohen's arrest, the Syrian government searches for more spies and accomplices. 500 citizens vanish from the streets of Damascus, many never to be seen again. The Syrians force Cohen to transmit false information, but he alerts Israeli intelligence to the truth by a subtle change in the way he presses his Morse code key. Cohen is beaten and tortured, but he never breaks. A vengeful Amin el-Hafez, betrayed and fearful for the future of his regime, orders a military show trial. Cohen is denied counsel and found guilty of treason. Despite the protests of world leaders, he is sentenced to death. May 18, 1965. Cohen is allowed to write one last letter to his family. He writes it in French, not wanting his last words to Nadia to be in the language of his executioners. My beloved Nadia, my beloved family, I am writing these last words in the hope that you will always stay together. I ask you not to mourn what happened, but to look to the future. I am sending you last kisses. Pray for my soul. Eli. In the middle of the night, Cohen is taken to El Marga Square in Damascus, the square of the martyrs. The rabbi of Damascus recites the prayer, Shema Yisrael. The executioner places a noose around Cohen's neck. He refuses a mask. His body dangles in the square into the early morning light. Paper is wrapped around his corpse, Arabic detailing his crimes against Syria. Years later, June 5th, 1967. After months of increasing tension and an Arab blockade of the Gulf of Aqaba, Israel launches lightning preemptive attacks on Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. It is known as the Six-Day War. Israeli jets attack Syria's hidden gun emplacements in the Golan. Troops and tanks storm the heights. They knock out all the artillery Syria thought was so cleverly conceived. All because of the pinpoint, detailed secret information smuggled out at the risk of death by Eli Cohen. The Golan Heights, the ruined bunkers, the wrecked remains of the Syrian military machine that once shelled Israeli settlers down below. For this moment in history remains in the hands of Israel. The former source of death and destruction is now a site for picnickers and tour groups, a living monument to the work of Eli Cohen. Not far from Tel Aviv is another more formal monument, a monument to spies. Appropriately, it is shaped like a maze. On its smooth stone walls are the Hebrew names and dates of death of the more than 400 men and women who have given their lives in the service of Israeli intelligence. Eli Cohen, date of death, May 18, 1965. He was 40 years old.
My name is Avram Cohen. I'm the youngest brother in a family of 8 siblings. My sister Odette was the eldest one, and Eli was the second. And the difference between the ages in me and Eli is 21 years. He should be now 94 years old. He was alive. My parents were descendants of the Sephardic exiles from Spain in 1492, when America was discovered by Columbus. And they escaped to Aleppo, Syria, and as children they left Syria and came to Alexandria, Egypt, before the World War I. This is the neighborhood where we grown up in Alexandria. Eli was a photographer. He knows how to color the pictures when there was no digital cameras and no colored films. This is the main synagogue in Alexandria. It's a very ancient synagogue, and it was destroyed by Napoleon when he conquered Egypt, and it's rebuilt in the 19th century. I want to emphasize that Zionist organization in Egypt were legally allowed to act in Egypt. And until the declaration of the Statehood of Israel in May 1948. And only under the pressure of the Arab League against King Farouk, he declared that the Zionist movement is no more legal in Egypt. And the situation changed immediately, the attitude towards the Jews in Egypt. And my parents decided that the good life in Alexandria or in Egypt came to an end, and they sent 3 of my brothers, my siblings, to Israel. My sister Odette and Maurice, he was younger than Eli, and another brother named Ezra. Before that, I want to say that about his mentor was Rabbi Moshe Ventura. He was asked by the Jewish community in Alexandria to be the chief rabbi of Alexandria. He was graduated in the Sorbonne University in Paris. He was a doctor of philosophy. And he hesitated if to be the chief rabbi because he wanted to continue in his working as academic works. But finally he decided to come to Egypt, and he served as the chief rabbi. His daughter, in her memoir, said that his life was saved because he accepted to be the chief rabbi of Alexandria. Otherwise he would be sent to Auschwitz if he remained in France. And he was the mentor of Eli Cohen. He wanted, because Eli was so talented, and he asked the permission of my parents to send him to a rabbinical seminar in the Isle of Rhodes. At that time, the Isle of Rhodes belongs to Italy, not to Greece as now. And there was a seminar for Sephardic rabbinical seminar, but because of this Second World War, the Italian closed this seminar, and Eli went to learn in the Alexandria University electrical engineering there. As I told you before, 3 of my brothers made Aliyah to Israel. Maurice, Odette, and Ezra joined the army immediately at the beginning of 1949. A few months later, the whole family arrived to Israel, except from Eli. Eli remained after us in Egypt for 8 years. He explained to my parents that he wanted to finish his study in the university for that year, and he will come after us, after he will finish this year of studying. But it was only excuse. We didn't know the real reason why he remained in Egypt. While we were in Israel, there were a military coup against King Farouk, who was the ruler of Egypt at that time. And in that revolution, General Naguib became the president of Egypt. But a few months later, Gamal Abdel Nasser, he took the power from General Naguib, and he became the ruler of the president of Egypt. Nasser signed an agreement with the British that they will withdraw from and called all the British troops to be back out of Egypt, and that was very dangerous for Israel at that time, because the British army was along the Suez Canal at that time, and it differed between the young Israeli army and the Egyptian army. So they decided, now it's considered very stupid to make a very stupid operation. They recruited students, Jewish students from Alexandria and from Cairo. They trained them to prepare bombs, homemade bombs, not efficient at all. And they were captured, and two people, one of them, a good friend of Eli, hanged in the jail of Cairo. Afterward, still we are in Israel, and Eli still in Egypt. Erupt the crisis of Suez crisis. Nasser, the president of Egypt, declared that the Suez Canal is he nationalized the Suez Canal, which was before the property of the French and the British. They built the canal. So they threatened Nasser to not to nationalize the canal, but he didn't accept, and they attacked him together with Israel. The French and the British bombarded the canal, the camps of the Egyptians along the canal, and Israel occupied the Sinai Peninsula within 3 days. And as a result of that, the Egyptians expelled all the foreigners from Egypt, the Italian, the British, French, almost all the Jewish community. And Eli also was arrested at that time. He thought that they revealed his activity in the underground in Egypt. But he revealed that he was arrested with thousands of people, other people. And after a few months, he was expelled to Europe, and from there he came to Israel. He arrived in Israel in 8th of February 1957, as I told you before, 8 years after we parted from him. Now, the real reason why he stayed in Egypt, we knew it only 10 years after the death of Eli Cohen.
אמש נערכה בבת ים עצרת זיכרון במלאת 10 שנים לעלייתו של אלי כהן על הגרדום בסוריה. ראש הממשלה יצחק רבין, שנתן חלק בטקס, עמד בדבריו גם על היבטים ידועים פחות בקורות חייו של אלי כהן.
אינני בא להוסיף על כל מה שנכתב עליו, אך אני יכול לומר כי סיפור גבורתו המלא והאמיתי טרם נכתב. נשאלת השאלה, מה עיכב את צאתו של אלי כהן ממצרים, כך שהוא הגיע למעשה עם הגל האחרון של העולים משם? התשובה היא אחת, אהבתו העזה של אלי כהן לעמו ולמולדתו. בגלל האהבה העזה זו, התנדב אלי להמשיך ולהתגורר במצרים תחת צל הרדיפות של שנות ה-50 לפני ואחרי מבצע קדש. מטרתו הייתה הצלת יהודי מצרים ועלייתם ארצה. שם הוא נשאר כפעיל עלייה בסתר עד גמר שליחותו שהוא הטיל על עצמו תוך רגש אחריות לאומית מפליא. אלי כהן, זיכרונו לברכה, הפך להגדה בתולדות ישראל.
The Prime Minister Rabin said that Eli volunteered to remain in Egypt and his aim was to rescue the diaspora of the Jewish diaspora in Egypt. He smuggled Jews from Egypt to Israel, and after he finished his job, only after the 57 he came to in February 57 he came to Israel, and 5 days only after his arrival to Israel, he was summoned to a unit which later will be annexed to the Mossad, an intelligence unit, in order to recruit him to be sent to an Arab country for espionage mission. He wrote his curriculum vitae, his CV, 8 pages in French, and at the last page he mentioned which languages he mastered, and he said, I mastered the languages Arabic, French, English, Italian, and Hebrew fluently. I speak and understand Greek and Spanish. My knowledge of Arabic language is perfect. I mastered the Egyptian dialect, Syrian dialect, and Lebanese dialect. At the end of this page, he signed that he will be ready to be sent to any mission, intelligence mission in any Arab country that will be needed. But they decided not to send him to an Arab country, to any Arab country at that time, because he was arrested in Egypt before when I told you about the operation against the British and American interests, which the students in Egypt, he was arrested with them, but released for lack of evidence. So all his details were in the hands of the Egyptian intelligence. So they were decided not to recruit him at that time. And he works in translation of Arab newspaper from Arabic to Hebrew, and also listening to radios from Arab countries and translated to Hebrew. Afterward, he was working as an accountant in a big company in Tel Aviv, and at the end of August 1959 he married Nadia, and a few months after his marriage he was fired from his job, and a representative of the unit of intelligence came to him and reminded him the CV that at the end of it, he signed that he is ready to be sent to an intelligence mission, and Eli gave him a while to think about it, And Eli wrote them a letter that is his handwriting in Hebrew, and he expresses his a positive answer to accept the job. Why now they wanted to recruit Eli Cohen before not? The main reason was that in 1958, Egypt and Syria became one country under the presidency of Gamal Abdel Nasser. And what was the aim of this unity? The destroying of Israel from the north to the south. Egypt in the south, Syria in the north, and that was the main reason. What they wanted someone to be in Syria to alert us if there will be some war or something like that. And they began training the craft of espionage. He had very good memory. Eli had photographic memory. He saw something here. He can see, says how many chairs there was in this room and what, how many bottles. He had an extraordinary memory, and he learned how to track and avoid exposing photography. He adapted himself to the area of Arab population. He studied the Islam, the prayer. He visited mosques in Israel, and they built for him a cover story. The cover story was very similar to his real life. His parents were Syrian also, according to the cover story. He was born in Beirut, not in Alexandria, and he was 10 years less than his real age. They give him documents that he looks younger also, and they sent him to his parents also left Syria and immigrated to Egypt, to Alexandria, like his real parents. But they died one after the other, his father first and then his mother, and his uncle in Buenos Aires called him to live with him in Buenos Aires, Alexandria. And he's, according to this cover story, he lived 16 years in Buenos Aires, but he was only 8 years there. 8 months. I'm sorry. It's very difficult to, if you go from one town in the United States to other, and to tell your friends that you lived there in other place in the United States 16 years. They will ask you, which school did you live there? Show us pictures that of your friends. What it was the name of your teacher, and so on. How many cinemas there were there? It's very difficult. Eli learned all these facts in Israel before he was sent to Argentina. I think that to be a good liar, you have to have a very good memory. Because if you lie to one friend, you don't remember what you said to the other friend before. Eli, as he came to Argentina, he met auditor and owner of Arab newspaper in bilingual magazine named Al Bandera Arabe in Spanish. It's mean the Arab flag. And he wrote articles in that magazine, and the distribution of that magazine enlarged because of his articles there. And the owner of this magazine loved very much Eli, and he introduced him to many people, important people in Buenos Aires, in the Arab community there. Among them was the military attaché of Syria in Buenos Aires, named Amin al-Hafiz, yes. While he was in Buenos Aires, Syria and Egypt, as I told you before, was united, one country, from 58, and in September 61 there was a coup, military coup against the regime, and Syria became separated again, and Nasser, General Nasser, didn't accept this coup, and he sent a battalion of parachutists to Latakia, to the harbor of Latakia, but he didn't succeed to cancel this coup against the Nasser regime. And the military attaché in Buenos Aires, he was very glad for that coup. And he celebrated the coup, or the separation from Egypt, by arranging a big party, which he invited to that party all the military attachés that served at that time in Buenos Aires. Among them was also the Israeli attaché, the military attaché in Buenos Aires. I showed this picture in Tel Aviv to retired officers, and some of the audience gave me a note in the middle of my speech. I took the note, and it was written, "My name is Brigadier Itzhak Elron. I was the military attaché at that time. My wife is here on the left side of the pictures, and I didn't recognize Eli at that time because he came from the Syrian part," he said. He came as a Syrian. After he finished his job in Buenos Aires, he separated from his friend there, and he told them that he are going to inherit a big sum of money in Lebanon and Syria that his uncle left for him. And they gave him letters of recommendation, also from the military attaché in Buenos Aires, and from the owner of this magazine. He came for a while, for 2 weeks, to Israel. At that time, my father passed away, and in the way to, after the Shiva, he left the family and wrote to us that we shall keep the Kaddish, say the Kaddish, and to safeguard our mother. And he came to the port of Genoa, the harbor of Genoa. There was a ship named Asperia, going from Genoa to Alexandria, Egypt, and from Alexandria to Beirut. On that ship was a Syrian merchant who lived during the World War II in Germany, in the Nazi Germany, and he smuggled some Jews from Europe to shelter places. Not because he loved Jews, but he loved money. And the German discovered that fact, and he escaped. And the American recruited him as a CIA agent, sent him to Korea, and afterward he returned to Syria and reported to the American embassy intelligence noticed and and he received salaries until the end of the 50s. How I know that? There are in the internet documents that released according to the law. His reporting was mainly about former Nazi officers living in Syria, and according to the law in America, they should release after a while in the law all these documents. So I saw them in the internet, and I saw that he was an agent of the CIA. I have the document. And he said to Eli to put his belongings on his car. He had a car in this ship, and they will pass from, they will drive from Beirut to Damascus. And this is the border between Lebanon and Syria. There is the custom there. And according to the trail, or the minute of the trail of Eli Cohen, Maj Sheikh al-Ard was also defended with Eli. And he was inquired, they asked him, when you arrived to Alexandria, why you demand that Eli to get out of the ship and go to the harbor of Alexandria, and you yourself remain in the boat, in the ship. And he started to swear, I didn't know that he is Eli Cohen. So answers the question, why you remained in the ship? And he said, you have to remember that it was after the separation between Syria and Egypt. And I was a Syrian citizen, so they had in Egypt bad feeling against the Syrian. But Eli Cohen, or Kamel Amin Thabit in his Arab name, he is an Argentinian. So what will happen to him? I told him to go and give me a juice of mango when you return. That's what said. Then they continued to inquire him. They said to him, when you arrived to Beirut, you called an Syrian intelligence office, which was your friend, and you asked him to release the car from the custom. And they didn't know, Eli and the Maj Sheikh al-Ard, when the officer will come to the border, because he should drive from Damascus to the border, and they should drive from Lebanon, from Beirut to the border. But he came earlier, but he had already all the details of the car, and when they arrived to the border, they made a very light checking of the car, and Maj Sheikh al-Ard and Eli Cohen went to Damascus. He dropped Eli on some hotel in Damascus, and he went to his manor in the suburbs of Damascus. He was a very wealthy man. At the night, according to the minute of the trial, he came to Maj Sheikh al-Ard villa in the suburb of Damascus, and he made for him a big party representing him as one of the richest persons in South America. And he is coming to expend his money here, to invest in Syria. Among the people invited to this party was the former ambassador of Belgium, the ambassador of Jordan, and some refugees from the Ba'ath Party of Iraq who get shelters in Damascus. And as I told you before, he introduced him as one of the richest persons in South America, and everyone wanted to be his friend, you know. This is the kind of car that he had, Opel Capital. The name of the officer, the intelligence Syrian officer, was Nasruddin Wanali. Eli has not, at the beginning at least, citizenship, Syrian citizenship, but only temporary permit. The reason was that it will be easier for him to get out of Syria if he is in danger. He chose to live in a fourth floor of a building looking at the headquarters of the Syrian army in Damascus, and also a neighborhood of all the embassies in Damascus. He was near the Indian embassy in Damascus. Only less than 2 weeks before, after his arrival to Damascus, he was invited to an interview in the radio of Damascus, and you will hear. It's in Arabic, so you will not understand it, but only listen to the name Kamel Amin Tabet.
المحكم الأمين ثابت المبتغ الشاب الذي هاجر من بلاده يرجع.
He said, today we are in Damascus with the brother Kamel Amin Tabet, who lived abroad, a young man who had immigrated from his country like a boy and returned to her as a man. His heart is full of love of the land, where he smiled for the first time, a smile of light. He returned to her to live among her flowers in the shadow of freedom and national pride. He returned to Damascus, the city of glory and the heart of Arabness. And he continued to ask him questions about their life in South America. And Eli, of course, answered this question with his imagination and said that how the merchants there started, at the beginning, going with donkeys to all the villages in South America, and then they became riches, and they are now a very wealthy community in South America that can help Syria. And he knew how to connect to people. When he was on the radio of Damascus, he was given a job there, a corner in a program to broadcast to South America, to speak in Spanish to the Arab community in South America. And it was twice a week that he had broadcasting to South America. And from the manager of the radio, he, with the nephew of the chief of staff, Zahreddin. This is the nephew of the chief of staff, and this is the chief of staff, Abdul Karim Zahreddin. He was the neighbor of George Saif, the responsible for the broadcasting in Spanish. And he introduced him to Eli. So Eli knew also the chief of staff, and he took him to the Golan Heights, to visit the Golan Heights. And when the commander of the Golan Heights, Zar al-Khariri, he saw that he came with the nephew of the nephew of the chief of staff. So he saw that he is a very important person, So he made a party for him also in the hotel in the Golan Heights there, inside the camp, and admired this tycoon that came to Syria to invest his money here. All those people were collaborating with him without knowing that they are helping a Jew who worked for Israel. Among them was two of his judges, Salim Khatum, the commander of the commando in Syria, Salah Haddadli, brigadier in the armored army, and of course the president of Syria, who was before the military attaché. He came in 1963 and became turned to be the president of Syria. And of course the head of the aircraft, Mustafa Atlas. One of the first cables he sent to Israel was after operation of retaliation against Syria, which Israel made in March 1962. This operation failed and 8 soldiers were killed. One of them, one soldier was missing, and Eli was asked by cable to try to find out what happened to that soldiers. And he visited the Golan Heights, and he didn't succeed to reveal what's happened to him. Until today, we don't know what happened to these soldiers. And he wrote, normal situation in all camps, no movement to the south. Our tanks are abandoned. This morning, 4 MiGs circled Damascus several times. That was the first one. And on the second one, not here, he announced Israel that the mayor of one of the villages in the Golan Heights were arrested because the reason was they suspect that he collaborated with Israel. While Eli was in Syria, my brother Maurice recruited to another intelligence unit. He was responsible for the communication with agents in Arab countries working for us. And he received all the cables from several agents in Syria, and they didn't know nothing about Eli. But one day he had to decode some cable, and after decoding, he saw that at the end of the message there are also a question. And he asked this agent, does Mademoiselle Fifi started to walk? And he searched for, he thought that there is a code within code, that Mademoiselle Fifi is something else, perhaps a military device or something like that. And they started to look at the books, where it is Mademoiselle Fifi. And he didn't find anything, and they left it as is. A few days later, he received an added cable from the same agent, and there was another question now. Did Nadia receive the sewing machine that I sent for her from Europe? And he decided to visit my sister-in-law at her house, and he saw the sewing machine there. And my sister-in-law said, yes, Eli sent it for me from Europe for my birthday. She said proudly, he sent it for my birthday. This is 2 novels, Anna Karenina and Les Trois Mousquetaires, the 3 Musketeers. This was the system that Eli decoded his cables. It's a very ancient system from the World War I. Who was in the film of the breaking the secrets of the Enigma, you know, the German machine that they coded their cables in the Second World War. And if you were in that film, you would remember that in the team that of scientists, British scientists that worked for broken this to understand how this machine is working, was also a Soviet spy in that team, and he transmit cables to the Soviet Union using the Bible. Same system. He used a book, and from the content of the page number 1, he took the letters, and according to a system he learned, he decoded his message to Israel. So Eli had this book, and another spy of Israel who was parallelly at the same time in Egypt, named Wolfgang Lutz, Zeev Gur-Aryeh. He served there in Egypt as a former Nazi officer. Here you see Eli with the elite of the Syrian regime, with the Prime Minister Samir Jundi. Here with his judge, head of the court, before he was captured, yes, in a luxurious restaurant in Damascus. I think it was in Purim because they were with masks. You see Eli with a plastic nose, and the judge with a peruke on his head. And this is his wife. She was a steward in Alitalia. And she helped me without knowing. He asked her to take some of his letters. He said, when I put this in the box post in Damascus, it would come 2 months later. And I am a businessman, I cannot work like this. Please do me a favor, take this letter, and when you land in Rome or in other places in Europe, never mind where, just put it in some box. And he sent through her messages to Israel. Here, Eli, and this is the president, Amin al-Hafez, entering the University of Damascus in August '64. You see the soldiers here saluting the president, and Eli was in the group, very close to the president. Now, in the trail, they asked Eli, who gave you the permission to enter the Golan Heights? Because the Golan Heights was forbidden to visit for civilian, even Syrian civilian. And only soldiers and officers that served in the Golan Heights were allowed to enter the Golan Heights. And how you succeed to enter the Golan Heights? Asked him. And he blamed the officer that helped him to enter Syria, you know, in the custom of the border between Lebanon. He said, I gave him 800 Syrian lira, and he didn't give him it. He didn't pay it after a while. And always, when asked, what about the loan I gave you? He said, I don't have now, I will pay you later. So okay, give me now permission to go to the Golan. And he gave me that, but that was not the truth. We received from the Mossad recently a document signed by the Chief of Staff of Syria. Here is the translation of this document. Syrian Arab Republic, the general headquarters of the army and the armed forces, intelligence department, security, 17th of October 1962. Confirmation passage to Al-Khama only. Names and number of traveling, one only, Mr. Kamel Amin Tabet. Nationality, Argentinian, Syrian origin. The reason, bathing. Date of departure and return. Departure on 19th October 62 and return on 30th of October 62. Very long bathing. This certificate is valid for several trips. The holder of this authorization must contact the intelligence branch in Equinatra upon arrival there. This authorization must be returned after use to the headquarters of the Army and Armed Forces Intelligence Department. Signed, General Abdul Karim Zareddin, Commander of the Army and Armed Forces. Today, this document was put on a brass board, and it is on this building, which was the headquarters of the Syrian in the Golan Heights, and it is in our hand today. This is the commander of the Golan Heights. His name was Ziad al-Hariri. He was told, he was the commander, and the person who ruled Syria, you have to know that from the mandate, French mandate, which ended in 46, the majority of the officers until today in the Syrian army are from minorities, Alawite and Druzes and Ismaili. The Sunni officers didn't want to enter the army at all. They didn't want to be soldiers, because this is, for people without education and so on, this is not for them. And that's the reason why now the minorities rules Syria. They asked Ziad al-Hariri, after the separation of Syria from Egypt, to make a revolution, to make another coup, and to take the power. They told he was a pro-Nasserist. They told him that they will bring back Nasser to power, and they told him to took his tanks from the Golan Heights and came to Damascus and took the key positions in the radio broadcasting, some ministers that are in Damascus, and to make a revolution and take the power. And he agreed, but they only used him for that reason. And after a while, there was a secret committee, military committee in the army, that they ruled Syria. But they have no courage at that time to put Alawi president in Syria. So they invited the military attaché, who was a Sunni, who served in Buenos Aires. He came after the revolution in March '63 to Syria, and he became the president of Syria. But he was not any power. He has not any power. The secret committee of the military committee told him to go right or left, or he only wasn't a puppet of them. Here you see he has a very good friend, a pilot of MiG-21, the most advanced jet in the world. You have to remember, on the 60s, the Soviet Union technology, military technology, was superior than the American technology. You have to remember that the first satellite to the moon was not American. If you remember Sputnik and Gagarin and Yuri Gagarin and the dog Laika that was sent to the moon, a year before, more than a year than the American started to develop the industry of space. So even the American wanted information about the MiG-21, and of course Israel wanted this information. And for that reason, he became friend with the pilot of MiG-21. And he organized for him a course to be a pilot. Eli get a course. You see here Eli on a pilot, and Adnan El-Jabi, the pilot of the MiG-21, sat behind him. Everyone loved money, so even the pilot. Eli is a millionaire, pretended to be a millionaire. You see how many people here are surrounding Eli in the base of the military airport in Damascus. He informed Israel about everything, about military information, about economic information. In every field, Eli, he was our ambassador in Damascus. Here, Eli was photographed with the nephew of the chief of staff, looking at the Golan, looking at the on the Kinneret from the Golan Heights. And there is a famous story that Eli recommended and contributed money to the Syrian to plant eucalyptus trees on the military camps in the Golan Heights, that the soldiers will have shade on the heat of the Golan Heights. And they accepted, and this was a sign for us from the air that we know where was the bunkers, because without this you couldn't see what is it here. There is hundreds of meters beneath the surface of the ground here. This was the nephew of he took him to the Golan Heights several times, and he showed him all the camps, all the plans that are playing against Israel. Not only what exists now, but what are they going to build in the future. The head of the court, who was his friend, asked him to which ministries and institutions you have able to penetrate. And Eli answered, the Ministry of Information, the Ministry of Defense, the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, the Central Bank. I visited El Hama twice, and I was present in armored maneuvers. I visited Zabadani and Baludan. Rifai from the Ministry of Economy was my friend. I knew Lieutenant Zahreddin, the nephew of the former Chief of Staff. Lieutenant Colonel Khalil Safur took me to the harbor of Latakia. I made friends with Michel Sass, one of the chief engineers involved in diverting the Jordan River sources. And he also told the secretaries of every minister in Syria, important ministries that he thought it's important for Israel, to give him a copy, on typewriting machine, put one copy more, he said, and give me the copy of every important decision. They asked him why. He said, I want to help the country to come from they are in the stage of the Middle Ages now. And I want to bring it to be on the 20th century, to become modern. So I see some that the government decides so and so. I want to know how can I help the government to improve this decision. And they accept, and they received gifts from Eli, some perfume or some other watch, a new watch, and everything. Everyone liked gifts. So how Eli was captured? On the movie you saw before, Israel also adopted the version of the president of Syria. There are two versions about capturing Eli Cohen. The version of the president Amin al-Hafiz and the head of the intelligence Colonel Ahmad al-Suudani. What's the president said? The president said that the Indian embassy in Damascus complained that they were transmitting messages to New Delhi. There were interference, electromagnetic interference on the air, and they couldn't transmit messages to abroad. So the authorities in Syria started to inquire about this. They received new equipment from the Soviet Union, and they searched all over Damascus until they saw where is the strongest signal came from, and it was from the house of Eli Cohen, and they captured him red-handed. That is one version. The other version is of the head of the intelligence. He said that we received information that there are two Arab citizens, Syrian citizens, working as a spy for the United States. One of them named Farhan el-Attasi, and the other is Moin al-Hakimi. Who is Farhan el-Attasi? The family of Attasi is a very famous and respected family from the time of the Ottoman Empire until today's. The first president of Syria after the French mandate came to end in 1946 was Hashem el-Attasi. And after him, 5 presidents from this family. Not one after the other, but 5 presidents of this family. And at the time of Eli, the deputy of the minister of the president of Syria was Nur ad-Din el-Attasi. And Farhan el-Attasi was first degree relative of Nur ad-Din el-Attasi. And he has gone to the United States on the 50s to study. He was a student there. And the Americans saw that here in the United States they have jewelry, because he is a very important person who comes from very important family in Syria. And they wanted information about the Soviet military technology. So they asked him, they recruited him to be a CIA agent, and asked him to try to receive, to put hand on a new missile that the Syrian Navy received lately from the Soviet Union. But he was a civilian. He came with his new wife from Lebanese source, and they were sent together to Damascus. And he tried to get help from his nephew, who was major in the Syrian Navy. The two of them received salary from the second secretary of the American embassy in Damascus. But they were promised to get $1 million for that if they will bring the missile to Cyprus. So he made all the efforts, but he didn't succeed because he was not involved in that brigade of the missiles in the Navy. So he recruited his friend that served in this brigade, and the Arab newspaper, the Syrian newspaper, called this new officer that was recruited by them the honest officer. Why? Because he informed his superior about this mission that he was asked to do, to bring the missile and bring them to the American. So that they told him, pretend that you are collaborating with him, continue to collaborate with them, and we will follow you and them, and we will photograph them and everything. So then the intelligence knew about what the Americans are planning to do, to get a Soviet missile. They started, and they saw, the head of the intelligence said in an interview he gave to a Lebanese newspaper that he saw that these people are visiting Eli in his house. Farhan al-Atasi and his nephew, Moin al-Hakimi, the major in the Navy, visiting Eli's apartment in Damascus. So at the beginning, they didn't suspect Eli because he was a very respected person and very close to the president, and they thought that they only visited him because they was their neighbor. I was in another visit here in the United States, in Connecticut, in 2011, in August 2011. It was a convention of Chabad there. After this convention was finished, I returned back home, and I saw an email coming from the site of Eli Cohen, and the headline of the email was close acquaintance. I opened this email, and it was written, my name is Jarir Latasi. I am 48 years old. I was 2 years old when my father, Farhan Latasi, hanged in the same square of where Eli was hanged 3 months before. I knew about this affair 30 years ago or 50 years ago, but I couldn't connect that with the affair of Eli Cohen. I wrote him an email and I told him that I was invited by Chabad to come in November to California. And instead of returning from San Francisco, I will change my returning and I will fly to Israel from JFK. And I will come a day or 2 days earlier to JFK. And he came and took me to his house in Staten Island, New York. He is a professor adjunct in Wagner College in Staten Island, New York, and deputy of the president of Mellon Bank in New York. And he introduced me to his mother. She didn't stop crying. She said, we were neighbors of Eli Cohen in Damascus. I was not so familiar with Kamel Amintabet, with Eli Cohen, but my husband, my late husband, worked with Eli. And Jarir Latasi gave me documents, which I will show you about his father and his uncle. And I returned back home, and I saw a headline on the newspaper in Israel. Nadia received documents from the Mossad that revealed after 50 years or something like this. I called the Mossad and they told me it's from the IDF, not from us. I called the archive of the IDF and I received a disk with the same documents, but not in hard copy, but a disk. I put this disk on my computer, and it was a big mass there, like a Geniza of Cairo. Here is a caricature in Arabic, here is a piece of paper, here is some paper in Hebrew, and so on. Then I found a page standalone, number 20. And it was written in Hebrew. The date was 1st of March, 65, Radio Damascus, 9 p.m. I started to read it, and it was written Eli's testimony in the court, he answered the question of the head of the court. He said, I went to the 4th floor, it was a rainy day, and I said to the major that the Americans are ready to pay $50,000 for information on the Syrian Navy. That was for me now after I spoke with the mother of Jarir Latasi, or the husband, the wife of Farhan Latasi. And now it's in Hebrew, Eli connected himself with that ring of American ring of spy. So I believe the version of the head of the Syrian intelligence that was the reason. And Maurice, who worked on the unit of intelligence that was responsible for the communication with the Arab agent, in August '64, he received an alert from Eli. There was a special sign. Every agent had his own special sign in case of emergency. The system was that everyone should not use in the alphabet letters one of the letters, and he should use it only in case of emergency. Even if he made mistake in some words. For example, don't use the letter Y. Even you want to say one day I will be there, one day it ends with Y. But you should not write the Y in the usual way. But not to be sure that this is a real sign of alert, you should put this letter in specific places in the cable. Because you can forget this, and you know how to write day, you write it with Y. So, not to make a mistake, you have to put it in a specific place. And Eli received that cable, and he began shouting and crying and panic at his unit, and he revealed the identity of his brother to his superior and to his friends there. But Eli came 1 month later to Israel. And I started not to believe Morris. He had another character than Eli. Morris, when you ask, he passed away already. When you ask him a question, you get very long answer, and with very colorful, with a lot of exaggeration and everything. He knew how to keep secret by telling you everything, but you don't believe him. That's a new system. But Eli was the opposite. If you ask him something, you will not hear from him any extra word or any exact question, exact answer without any more detail than necessary. But I understood later that he talked the truth about he received an alert, and now I found the reason for that alert. In August '64, those people were already under surveillance of the Syrian intelligence. And Eli knew about that, and he alerted Israel about that fact. And he knew that if they will be captured, he will be captured. This is Farhan al-Attasi. This is Farhan al-Attasi. He was 36 years old, and he was 40 at that time. And this is the officer, Major Abdel Moin al-Hakimi. And this is the second secretary. He was a CIA person, undercover of second secretary in the embassy of United States in Damascus. He was expelled from Syria as a persona non grata, and the wife of Farhan al-Attasi and his son Jarir. This is Farhan al-Attasi here. This is the head of the intelligence, Syrian intelligence. Now, he was nominated by the new chief of staff, Salah Jadid. Salah Jadid was Alawite, like Bashar al-Assad today. And he thought that the period of Amin al-Hafiz came to an end. They wanted to be their own, they do not need, they get enough courage to be the president. No? So he told the president, Amin al-Hafiz, you pretend to be a socialist. We are a socialist party. The Ba'ath Party is a socialist party. But we are worse than the United States, he said, capitalist. He said in Damascus itself, there are more than 700 private companies that taking the money from the people, the poor people in Syria. You should nationalize these companies. And he forced the president, which was weak from two aspects. He was sent to a surgery in France. Eli recommended for him for a good physician in French. And he came back very weak to Syria, and also politically he was very weak. And he forced him to nationalize these 700 companies in Syria. And the merchants in Syria and Damascus made a strike. They stopped all the market. And the chief of staff revealed who were the leaders of that strike and hanged them, 11 people, on the same day in the main square of Damascus. The atmosphere when Eli returned back to Syria was worse when today with Daesh, with ISIS. Every day, every 2-3 days, there were other people were hanging on the square. And he was not the head of the intelligence was not nominated by the president, but by the chief of staff. And when they wanted to, the head of our intelligence, the head of the Mossad, Meir Amit, wanted to rescue Eli Cohen. He sent the attorney from France, Jacques Mercier, and told him to make an appointment with head of the intelligence in Syria and try to make a deal with him. What is the deal? We will give him information about a coup against the regime that we know that is planned to be in the future, and they will release the punishment of make it easier for Eli. But he didn't know that he is one of the team of the coup, because Eli didn't serve anymore. So he go to the cat to he gave the cat to keep the milk, you know. This is you see the defendants on the coat of on the trail of Eli Cohen. This is Eli. This is Matt Sheikh al-Ad, who helped me to enter Syria. This is George Seif, who was responsible for the broadcasting to South America. This is the nephew of the chief of staff, the former chief of staff. And this is the manager of the airport in Damascus. And this is the head of the court, a good friend of Eli, and Salim Khatoum, the commander of the commando, also a friend of Eli. Here's the last letters that Eli wrote before 5 minutes before his death. The rabbi made him a confession, a vidui, and said Shema Israel, but he was very old, and he, because of the situation, he forgot to pray, and he made a mistake. And the Arab press said that Eli corrected his praying because he had a good memory. He remembered from his childhood all the prayer, and he corrected the rabbi. Here is what's written in that letters. To my dear wife Nadia and my dear parent, I am writing to you these last words a few minutes before my end, and I would like to beg you to be in a good relationship forever. I request you, dear Nadia, to pardon me and take care of yourself and our children. Look after them thoroughly, bring them up and give them complete education. Don't deprive them or yourself of anything. Please be always in close communication with my dear parent. You can get married in order to deprive the children, not to deprive the children from a father. You have a full liberty to do so. I am begging you, my dear Nadia, not to spend your time in weeping about something already past. Concentrate on yourself, looking forward for a better future. I am sending my last kisses to you and to the children, Sophie, Irit, and Shaul. Also to all my family, especially to my mother, my sister Odette and their family, Maurice and his family, Ezra and his family, Sarah and her family, Sion and his family. Everyone in his name, he said before his death. Alfred, Ephraim and his family, and at the end, Abraham. Don't forget also your dear family. Give them my best regards. Don't forget to pray for the soul of my late father and of mine. Receive all of you my last kisses and blessing. Eli Cohen, 18 of May, 65. On 2005, the Academy of the Craft of Espionage were named on the name of Eli. You see, המדרשה על שם אלי כהן לזכר לוחמי המוסד. And they put the sculpture of Eli on the entrance, and on this board they said that in his service, 3 years service in Damascus, and the information he transferred to Israel brought us to the victory in the Six-Day War. Six-Day War. To end it in more optimistic, I put the head of Eli on. Today the Syrian people would prefer Eli as president than Bashar al-Assad. Thank you.